Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Brendan Fallon. The 2024 Summer Olympic Games have kicked off its opening in Paris. Find out about the big names and even bigger crowds at what is being deemed the largest opening ceremony in Olympics history. A high-speed train network in France was sabotaged early this morning, causing travel chaos and exposing security gaps for the Paris Olympic Games. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrives in Florida to meet with former President Trump. Find out what they talked about. Lawmakers are pushing back on a proposed battery company that plans to open a new facility in Michigan. They say the company is tied to the Chinese regime and profits of forced labor. And 2 Chinese nationals pleaded guilty in U.S. District Court this week. They were part of a transnational suppression campaign launched by the Chinese regime. Our reporter was in the courtroom. Authorities say a man pushing a burning car into a gully is what started a California fire. More on the suspect and the Park Fire, which has spread to be the largest in the state this year. Spectators aren't letting bad weather stop them from watching a once-in-a-lifetime Olympic opening ceremony. Hundreds of thousands are gathered along Paris's Seine River to cheer on the procession of athletes and watch performances from mega pop stars. NTD's Fiona G has more.
The Olympic opening ceremony is well underway in the City of Lights. Today marks the final day of the Olympic torch relay, which started over 3 months ago. In the final leg of its journey, the torch was carried by a host of well-known public figures, from the International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach and former Secretary General of the United Nations Ban Ki-moon, to rappers Snoop Dogg and singer Pharrell Williams. The torch will light the Olympic cauldron tonight, marking the official beginning of the 2024 Paris Summer Olympic Games. Just hours before the start of the opening ceremony, world leaders arrived at the Élysée Presidential Palace. French President Emmanuel Macron welcomed U.S. First Lady Jill Biden, King Felipe of Spain, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, among others. Nearly 7,000 athletes will sail 3.5 miles along the Seine River. Celine Dion is rumored to be performing tonight. It is raining in Paris, and storms are predicted later tonight, but spectators aren't fazed.
Well, if you live in Paris, you're always ready for rain. And I brought 2 things, umbrella and raincoat and hope. Doesn't really matter. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, so I'm ready.
Rain, snow, sleet. We're going to be there. We're going to be supporting our countries. I don't think rain is going to stop anybody. Terrible weather is not going to stop anyone. We're just excited to be here. That's what I think. So I'll be there.
Up to 3 billion people are expected to tune in for the opening ceremony. More than 10,500 athletes will compete at the Olympics, 100 years since Paris last staged the Games. This year, the Olympics will run until August 11th. Fiona G., NTD News.
Railway transport in France falls into chaos after a series of pre-dawn attacks on the country's busiest rail lines. The coordinated acts of vandalism heightened security concerns just hours before the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympic Games. NTD's international correspondent David Vives has the story.
800,000 train commuters are blocked today in France and neighboring countries, according to French State Railway Company. This follows a coordinated sabotage of railways during the night in the country. Many stations are seeing crowds of people waiting with anxiety. Signal boxes have been vandalized along the lines connecting Paris with cities such as Lille in the north, Bordeaux in the west, and Strasbourg in the east. The state-owned railway operator calls the vandalism a massive attack, attempting to block all high-speed lines.
I think that there was a real intention to harm and cause serious harm, since the place also where these fires were caused corresponds to bifurcations.
France's railway company has called for passengers who can postpone their travel to do so. Repairs will occur until the end of the week, significantly disturbing all travels. Travelers who have booked tickets to see the Olympic ceremony this Friday are left to worry.
Oh, totally nervous about missing it.
Nervous about missing it, yes. Yeah, because it's something that we've planned and we're looking forward to, and it's almost like a once in a lifetime because you don't get to go to that all the time, so we're hoping we make it.
France's Prime Minister said an investigation has just begun and that the perpetrators knew exactly where to strike. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Florida today for a meeting with former President Trump. The Israeli leader met with President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris yesterday. The day before that, he gave his fourth speech before a joint session of Congress. Now he's at Trump's Mar-A-Largo resort. The two briefly answered reporters' questions.
The president has done what I've done for Israel, and we've always had a very good relationship. And if I didn't, I have a secret weapon. You know what it is? Sarah. She's sitting right on me. I have Sarah. As long as I have Sarah, that's all that matters.
Do you feel like after this trip, Mr. Prime Minister, we're any closer to a ceasefire deal?
I hope so, but I think time will tell. We're certainly eager to have one, and we're working on it.
Can you tell us the status of the hostage negotiations?
I think there's been some movement because of the military pressure that we exerted. I hope that there'll be sufficient movement to get the deal completed.
It's a very tough. That's a very tough situation. The hostages, they have to be given back immediately because there can be no way that they're in good shape. They're obviously not being treated properly, and you hope that they're okay. But there are a lot of hostages, I'm sure, that will not be okay, and it's just not an acceptable situation.
Barack Obama and Michelle Obama have endorsed Kamala Harris for president. In a video released today, the former president said he couldn't be prouder to endorse Harris and to do everything he can to help her get into the Oval Office.
I can't have this phone call without saying to my girl Kamala, I am proud of you. This is going to be historic.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
Oh my goodness. Michelle, Barack, this means so much to me. I am looking forward to doing this with the two of you, Doug and I both, and getting out there, being on the road. But most of all,
Harris thanked the Obamas for their support and expressed gratitude for their decades-long friendship. Obama did not immediately endorse Harris after President Biden announced he was dropping out of the race. Democrats have been moving quickly to nominate Harris. The party adopted new rules this week to choose their presidential nominee by virtual roll call. Voting to officially nominate Harris is likely to begin on August 1st. Members of Congress and industry leaders gathered in a small Michigan town to oppose the opening of an electric vehicle battery manufacturing facility because of its ties to the Chinese Communist Party. They say the company's profits off of forced labor. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Goshen High-Tech, an electric vehicle battery manufacturing company, is planning to open a new facility in Green Charter Township, Michigan, but it's facing pushback from lawmakers and others who say the company uses forced labor and is tied to the Chinese Communist Party.
I've said from the beginning that I want to see this area have more jobs and investment, but we must not welcome companies that are controlled by people who see us as the enemy.
According to their own bylaws, Goshen is required to, quote, to carry out party activities in accordance with the Constitution of the CCP, unquote.
For all practical purposes, the United States of America and the rest of the free world are now in a Cold War, though now with the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party.
The CCP's strategy is to undercut the civilian markets, overproduce, flood the market with products that are so cheap, so inexpensive that it kills off competition and eliminates access to these products unless you purchase from the CCP.
The tie between forced labor and human rights abuses in China and Chinese industrial policy is precisely how Beijing cements and spreads its genocide. It's also how China makes sure that the rest of the world can't do anything about it. If we depend on China's genocide, how are we supposed to fight it?
Now, taking action on this is Congressman John Molinar, the chairman of the House Select Committee on the CCP, which is nonpartisan. He introduced the No Goshen Act, which already has over 20 co-signers, and it would disallow any company that's tied to the Chinese Communist Party from receiving federal tax credits. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Weeks before the start of school, an 11-year-old Virginia boy is facing a slew of charges today for allegedly making swatting phone calls. Police say he made more than 20 bomb or active shooting threats to Florida schools. Swatting is making a false emergency call to police in order for them to send armed officers, or SWAT teams to a location. Investigators in Flagler County, Florida, tracked the calls to a home near Richmond, Virginia. Upon a search of the house where the 11-year-old lived, he confessed to making the calls. He also admitted he called the Maryland State House. Investigators say he's also made swatting calls to 5 other states. He's in custody in Virginia until he's extradited to Florida. The boy faces 29 felony counts and 14 misdemeanors. The Nebraska Supreme Court ruled against Planned Parenthood today. The High Court said a state law restricting abortion and transgender procedures for youth does not violate the Nebraska Constitution. Lawyers for the American Civil Liberties Union, who represented Planned Parenthood of the Heartland, argued the law violates the state constitution's single subject rule. They claim there are subjects in the law, one for restricting abortion, the other restrictions on transgender hormones and surgeries for minors. Nebraska's High Court agreed that they were 2 separate types of health care, but stated both fall under the umbrella of medical care. The ACLU sued the state over the 2023 combined law, but a lower court threw out the lawsuit last August. The Nebraska Supreme Court based its decision in part on an 1895 rule that allows the state constitution a broad range when it comes to what composes a single subject. 2 cartel leaders were captured yesterday. Mexican drug lord Ishmael El Mayo Zambada and the son of his former partner, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, were arrested in El Paso, Texas. Mexico said they did not participate in the operation. NTD's Daniel Monahan tells us how they were caught and what charges they face.
Zambada and Joaquin Guzman Lopez, the son of El Chapo, face multiple charges for heading the cartel's criminal operations, including its deadly fentanyl manufacturing and trafficking networks. 2 law enforcement officers told CNN that the sting operation to catch Zambada duped the alleged drug lord into flying to the U.S. under false pretenses. The news network says Zambada and Guzman Lopez boarded a plane purportedly en route to inspect a property in Mexico, adding that at least one of the men was unaware they were headed to the U.S. FBI agents reportedly arrested the 2 alleged drug kingpins after they landed in El Paso. U.S. authorities had sought Zambada's capture for years, and in 2021 raised the reward for information leading to his arrest to $15 million. Zambada is one of the most consequential traffickers in Mexico's history and co-founded the Sinaloa cartel with El Chapo, who was extradited to the United States in 2017. El Chapo is currently serving a life sentence in a maximum security prison. After El Chapo's extradition, his criminal empire was inherited by 4 of his sons, known as Los Chapitos, or Little Chapos. The 4 took over his faction of the cartel and became some of the biggest exporters of fentanyl to the United States. U.S. federal prosecutors in February charged Zambada with conspiracy to manufacture and distribute fentanyl. The DEA says the deadly substance is the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. Attorney General Merrick Garland issued a statement saying the Justice Department will not rest until every single cartel leader, member, and associate responsible for poisoning American communities is held accountable. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Authorities say a burning car pushed into a gully sparked California's largest wildfire of the year, which has tripled in size in one day. Flames from the blaze exploded into what is now the Park Fire, which has set over 250 square miles of land near the city of Chico ablaze.
The fire quickly began to outpace our resources because of the dry fuels, the hot weather, the low humidities, and the wind. We have numerous structures that have been destroyed, and we're working to get an accurate number to share with you.
Evacuations were ordered in Butte and Tehama counties. According to CAL FIRE, 0% of the fire was contained as of this morning. A California prosecutor says a 42-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of starting the wildfire. He was identified as Ronnie Dean Stout II. Butte County District Attorney Mike Ramsey says CAL FIRE arson investigators made the arrest early yesterday, and the suspect will be arraigned Monday. When we come back, Crowdstrike CEO says more than 97% of Windows sensors are back online after a major IT outage. NTD speaks with the Chief Technology Officer of a cutting-edge operating system to learn more about the risks of a centralized internet. A typhoon drenches towns in northeastern China after spinning through Taiwan and parts of southeast China, leaving destruction in its wake. That and more after the break. The Pentagon says it found $2 billion more worth of errors in the calculations for military aid sent to Ukraine. A new government report says it raises improperly valued materials to a total of $8.2 billion. NTD's Chris Beers has more.
The report from the Government Accountability Office shows unclear accounting definitions led to challenges in accurately valuing defense articles. The Pentagon says last year staff used replacement value instead of depreciation value to value the billions in aid sent to Ukraine. The error created a path for billions more to be sent to Kyiv. The Accountability Office said a vague definition of value in the Foreign Assistance Act caused inconsistencies in the reported value. The office also cited the lack of specific valuation guidance for Presidential Drawdown Authority. The office is recommending that Congress clarify the definition of value in defense articles that are authorized through the Presidential Drawdown Authority.
A $50,000 bribe offered to an undercover U.S. tax agent to aid Beijing's transnational suppression. U.S. authorities reveal a secret operation by 2 Chinese agents under the direction of a Chinese official. NTD's Flora Hua brings us the latest on the case.
Here in the Southern District Court of New York, a Chinese citizen pleaded guilty to acting as a foreign agent on behalf of China and bribing a U.S. official. 44-year-old Lin Feng entered the courtroom with his head down, escorted by 2 officers. He is facing 2 serious charges that could send him to prison for up to 15 years, plus a $500,000 fine. The other defendant, Chen Jun, pleaded guilty last week to the same charges. According to the indictment, the duo contacted an undercover federal agent acting as an IRS official last year. The bribes aim to advance their complaint that would strip a New York-based Falun Gong organization's federal tax exemption. Falun Gong is a spiritual discipline in China that faces nationwide persecution by the Chinese regime. Revoking the exemption would increase the organization's federal tax burden. Inside the courtroom, Feng told the judge that Chen works with key people from the Chinese regime and businesses. Feng said he heard instructions during Chen's calls with Chinese officials to harm the Falun Gong group and admitted to helping Chen with these actions. The judge said he's satisfied with Feng's courtroom behavior and recommends a sentence of 12 to 18 months in prison. Reporting from White Plains, New York, Flora Hua, NTD News.
Cars and motorbikes are submerged in floodwater as Typhoon Gaimi pummels towns in China's northeast. The heavy rains and strong winds caused heavy flooding. The typhoon is the most powerful storm to hit the country this year. It has affected almost 630,000 people in a southeastern province so far, with almost half of them having to relocate. Earlier this week, it killed dozens of people as it swept through Taiwan and worsened seasonal rains in the Philippines. While Gaimi has been downgraded to a tropical storm because of slower wind speeds, it still poses a significant flood risk, particularly for rivers in central China, which are already elevated due to summer rains. Crowdstrike CEO says more than 97% of Windows sensors are back online. The announcement comes a week after a software update by the cybersecurity firm triggered a global IT outage. NTD's Andrew Thomas speaks with the Chief Technology Officer of a first-of-its-kind operating system to learn more about the risks of a centralized internet.
Last week, an antivirus software update issued by cybersecurity company Crowdstrike caused more than 1 billion Windows-based computers to crash. The outage halted essential operations at airports, hospitals, 911 centers, and police departments. Technologist Alexander de Ritter says the issue isn't limited to these areas.
Which industries are most susceptible to these types of outages?
I think every industry that uses computers, operating systems like that, are susceptible. This is why it's a wake-up call for the industry about just how vulnerable we are. Now, it was not a security incident as such, but cyber criminals are paying attention.
While the outage wasn't caused by malicious actors this time, the incident has them intrigued.
They're saying, hey, you know what? If we could get into CrowdStrike's servers and manipulate their code somehow and cause it to update all these computers. Windows seems to have a nice shiny door where it just lets the CrowdStrike right into computers worldwide. It opens up new and creative ideas on how they can exploit widespread software that is widely deployed.
Is July 18th's CrowdStrike outage symptomatic of a larger issue?
I think that we're living in a world with increased centralization, and to an extent, this is highly efficient and highly economical. So to an extent, this is what the market wants.
However, convenience and connection come with risks. DeRitter explains that there need to be contingencies.
I wouldn't dismantle like the global interconnectedness because it has great benefits and efficiency, but I think we ought to think about resilience and redundancy and treat this like a serious wake-up call, because lives can be at stake.
According to Microsoft, the July 18th outage affected about 8.5 million Windows devices. Once CrowdStrike's investigation is complete, it will release a full analysis of the crash to the public. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
The California Supreme Court ruled yesterday Uber and Lyft drivers will continue to be classified as independent contractors, not employees. The New York Times said justices upheld an old ballot measure. A ruling to overturn could have had a profound effect on the California's gig economy. The ballot measure started as an attempt by companies like DoorDash, Instacart, and the rideshare giants. The measure's intent was to avoid classifying drivers as employees and having to provide workers benefits like overtime and sick leave pay. A California Superior Court deemed the measure unconstitutional. It made its way through appellate courts, ending with the California Supreme Court. Justices voted unanimously to uphold the voter-approved law passed in 2020. The decision is considered a win for giants like Uber, DoorDash, and Lyft. Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Brendan Fallon. Join Tiffany Meyer for the NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific. Have a great weekend.